The island-hopping campaign started by the US pushed the Japanese all the way back to the Philippines, and the Japanese inner defense ring was breached when the United States captured most of the Mariana Islands, giving them the ability to send the large B-29 superfortress system bombard the Japanese home islands. Invasion of the Marianas in 1944 forced Japan to use most of their carriers to sink the American carriers, which were their greatest threat. The Battle of the Philippine Sea occurred in June, and their fleet carriers Taiho, Shokaku, and Hio sank, while most others were damaged by dive bombers. Most of the aircrew and aircraft were shot down by Hellcats and Corsairs in the Marianas Turkish route, so large-scale Japanese carrier operations were more or less impossible. They still had a strong surface force with large guns. The 2 Yamato-class battleships were ready, as well as a couple of Kongos, a couple of Fusos, Iseis, and the Nagato. Heavy cruisers were still in large numbers. All 4 Takawas were still operational, the 3 Mogamis, 2 Toneis, 4 Miyokos, and Aoba, bringing the total up to 9 battleships and 14 heavy cruisers. Their carrier force was small, only 4 of them in operational state, the last survivor of the Pearl Harbor raid Zuikaku, and the smaller converted Zuiho, Chitose, and Chiyoda. The Americans, on the other hand, were preparing for invasion of new islands. 2 invasion targets were put on the table, either the Philippines or Formosa, now called Taiwan. While Formosa could serve as a base for an invasion of mainland China, General Douglas MacArthur, who promised that he will return to the Philippines, thought that Formosa would be unnecessary. So after meetings, the invasion target would be the Philippines, and the invasion would start at the island of Leyte in central Philippines. The Allied naval plan was to support the invasion with Halsey's 3rd Fleet, which also featured Task Force 38, a large carrier force commanded by Vice Admiral Mark Major. The Japanese prepared for 4 victory plans, Shogo 1 being major naval operations in the Philippines, Shogo 2 at Formosa, Shogo 3 in the Ryukyu Islands, and Shogo 4 at Kuril Islands. In October 1944, a series of large-scale carrier raids against Formosa and the Ryukyu Islands convinced the Japanese to start Operation Shogo 2, launching waves of air attacks against 3rd Fleet's carriers. Around 600 Japanese aircraft were shot down in 3 days, almost losing their entire air strength in the region. When the invasion of the Philippines began, the Japanese Navy began Operation Shogo 1. This called for a small carrier force, which would sail from the north to lure American carriers away from the Japanese battleships. The southern force would push their small force up Surigao Strait, while the center force under the command of Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita, which was the most powerful force, would push through the San Bernardino Strait into the Philippine Sea, turning southwards and then attacking the landing area. This would be their last chance for a victory, and if they lose in the Philippines, they would surely lose the war altogether. The Battle of Leyte Gulf was on the horizon, and it would be the largest naval battle in history, with over 350 warships in total, not including transport ships. 4 major engagements would occur in this battle. In this video, we'll talk about Kurita's center force and the battles of Buansea and Samar. So Kurita, as said before, had the most powerful force in the remaining Japanese navy. This force consisted of 5 battleships, these being the Yamato, Musashi, Nagato, Kongo, and Haruna, 10 heavy cruisers, these being the Atago, Maya, Takao, Chokai, Miyoko, Haguro, Kumano, Suzuya, Tone, and Chikuma, 2 light cruisers, these being Noshiro and Ihagi, and 15 destroyers. The most powerful Japanese destroyer Shimakaze was also inside the destroyer force. This force sailed around the Palawan Islands around midnight on October 22nd to 23rd. 2 American submarines, the Darter and Ace, were positioned together close by. The Darter's radar detected the Japanese formation and sent out 3 reports. At least one of these 3 got picked up by a radio operator in Yamato, but Kurita failed to take appropriate anti-submarine precautions. The 2 submarines prepared for a strike, and at 5:24, the Darter fired a salvo of 6 torpedoes. At least 4 of these torpedoes hit the flagship Atago, and around 10 minutes later, Darter made 2 hits on the Takao with another spread of torpedoes. At 5:56, Dace hit the heavy cruiser Maya with 4 torpedoes. Atago and Maya quickly sank, and the Takao turned back to Brunei, getting escorted by a pair of destroyers. For most of the 24th, Task Force 38 had about 40% less of its air strength. Japanese land-based aircraft were dispatched to attack Task Force 38, but most aircraft were shot down by fighters. However, one Japanese D4Y3 slipped through the defenses, and at 9:38, the dive bomber's 250-kilogram bomb hit Princeton. Armed torpedo bombers exploded on deck, and bomb penetrated to an area of the ship where torpedoes were not stored properly. The explosion caused a severe fire in Princeton's hangar, followed by smaller explosions inside the ship. The fire was put out, but at 15:23, there was another large explosion, probably the carrier's bomb stowage aft, causing more casualties. The light cruiser Birmingham, which was assisting Princeton in the fight against the fire, received such damage by the explosion that the cruiser had to retire. Princeton was scuttled by the cruiser Reno at 17:50. Aircraft from the carriers Intrepid and Cabot attacked the Japanese center force at around 10:30, scoring hits on the battleship Yamato, Musashi, and Nagato, also badly damaging the heavy cruiser Miyako, which returned to Borneo. A second wave was sent from Intrepid, Essex, and Lexington, and 10 hits on Musashi forced her to withdraw from the battle, and as she was listing to port, a third wave from Enterprise and Franklin hit her with 11 bombs and 8 torpedoes. At 19:35, Musashi sank after getting hit by 17 bombs and 19 torpedoes. The survivors of the Battle of Sibuyan Sea still pushed forward, coming to contact with Taffy 3 in the Battle of Samar. Halsey was lured away to attack the 4 Japanese carriers up north in the Battle of Cape Engano, taking his fast battleships along with him. The Battle of Samar would also add a new dangerous Japanese tactic, the kamikaze. Taffy 3 had 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers and 4 destroyer escorts. Around 400 aircraft would also take part in the battle from Taffy 1, 2, and 3. The escort carrier St. Louis launched 4 Avengers, which would conduct anti-submarine patrol. At around 6:30, an Avenger flown by Ensign William C. Brooks sighted the Japanese ships heading towards Taffy 3. He said that he saw pagoda masts, the biggest meatball flag on the biggest battleship he ever saw. 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 10 destroyers headed his way. At around 7 in the morning, Yamato opened fire at a range of 17 nautical miles. The Americans only had 5-inch guns to counter them, while destroyers and destroyer escorts could also send out torpedo attacks. Kurita mistook his enemy for carriers from the 3rd Fleet, so his ships fired armor-piercing ammunition. Admiral Sprague ordered his carriers to hide under the squall to the east, and his escorting ships to deploy smoke screens. All available aircraft were sent off with whatever armament they had loaded to damage the Japanese as much as possible. Pilots were ordered to attack the Japanese force and then hit the Tacloban airstrip in Leyte to refuel and rearm. To distract the enemy, the aviators made dry runs. At about 7:20, the carriers entered the squall. A series of formations began pushing forward and then turning away, leaving no Japanese units in position to intercept American carriers. Each of the Fletcher-class destroyers only had 5 5-inch guns and 10 torpedo launchers. Each John C. Butler-class destroyer escort was only armed with 2 5-inch guns and 3 torpedoes. At 7 o'clock, commander of the destroyer Johnston responded by laying down a smoke screen and started to zigzag. 10 minutes later, the destroyer opened fire on its closest target, the heavy cruiser Kumano. Several hits were scored on the Kumano superstructure, which erupted into flame and smoke. A torpedo salvo was also launched on the heavy cruiser, 2 or 3 of them striking the Kumano. Its bow has been completely blown off. Suzuya stopped to assist Kumano and the cruiser was taken out of the fight. Battleship shells passed right through Johnston's hull, cutting the speed by half. The shells came from Yamato, and the destroyer Kishinami reported that the Yamato sank 1 enemy cruiser. In reality, Johnston was still afloat and retreated to fix some of its modules. The destroyer's guns shortly after fired shells towards the heavy cruiser Tone and then the battleship Haruna, both of them getting hit multiple times. Johnston sank at around 10 minutes past 10. The Hoel was hit by secondary guns from Yamato, 1 shell hitting the bridge of the destroyer. Hoel sent a salvo of torpedoes towards the heavy cruiser Haguro, but its spread missed. Shells hit Hoel, disabling all primary and secondary batteries, and the second torpedo spread was fired against the Japanese battleships. The order to abandon ship was given at 8:40, and the crew left the destroyer to its fate. The forward guns waited for the Japanese to get close and then fired at them. At 10:55, Hoel rolled over and sank. The Samuel B. Roberts attacked Chokai with a spread of torpedoes and then disappeared in smoke. At least 1 torpedo hit Chokai, and the heavy cruiser slowed down and fell out of the rear of the formation at 8:23. Chikuma then appeared and exchanged fire with the Roberts, and the destroyer escort expended anything from armor-piercing, high-explosive and star shells. Chikuma was then joined by multiple Japanese ships, and the Roberts began to suffer heavily. Credit for sinking of the destroyer escort was given to Congo, which knocked out her remaining engines at around 9 o'clock. Human attacked the heavy cruiser Haguro with her 5-inch guns, while preparing its torpedoes for an attack. 7 torpedoes were launched, guns then turned to engage Haruna. At 4 kilometers distance, the remaining 3 torpedoes were launched, but the battleship evaded them. Guns turned towards the battleship Nagato after believing they hit a Japanese battleship with torpedoes. At 8:26, Commander Thomas requested covering fire on the cruisers firing on the escort carriers from the east. Heerman then fired at Chikuma at about the same time as Samuel B. Roberts did, and later the destroyer got hit by multiple 8-inch guns. By around 9, the Japanese heavy cruisers were under heavy air attack, and Chikuma disengaged and sank during her withdrawal. At 9:07, Tone exchanged fire with Heerman, but the heavy cruiser returned away just 3 minutes later. Heerman was the only destroyer from the screen to survive the battle. The escort carriers opened fire at around 8 in the morning, and they contributed to the sinking of the heavy cruiser Chokai. Kalinin Bay was hit by an 8-inch shell. More of them followed up, but because they were armor-piercing, most shells just went past the carriers. Yamato opened fire early against the USS White Plains, scoring a near miss. Gunners of this carrier claimed a total of 6 hits on the cruiser Chokai, shortly afterwards followed by a bomb. Gambier Bay would be attacked by Chikuma at a range of 5 nautical miles. The carrier was soon dead in the water and Gambier Bay capsized and sank at 9:11. She was the only U.S. carrier sunk by naval gunfire in World War II. St. Lo engaged a Tony-class cruiser at around 7:40. At 10:51, A-0 crashed into the flight deck. This was the first kamikaze attack in World War II. The resulting explosions forced Captain Francis McKenna to order abandon ship by 11. St. Lo capsized and sank at 11:25. Kalenin Bay would be hit by a 14 or 16-inch shell at around 7:50. Tone and Haguro attacked Kalenin Bay at 8, and 25 minutes later, the carrier hit a turret of an Achi-class cruiser. Multiple 8-inch shells hit Kalenin Bay, and at around 10:50, 4 kamikazes attacked the escort carrier. 2 were shot down, but the third crashed into the port side of the flight deck, and the fourth destroyed the aft port stack. Kitkan Bay wasn't attacked throughout the surface action, and she launched Avengers, which would unsuccessfully attack Yamato. The ship was attacked by a kamikaze at 11:08, and she was successfully defended by anti-aircraft batteries. The carrier escaped undamaged. Fanshawe Bay was targeted by Kongo and Haruna early in the battle, but the shells missed the ship. During the later kamikaze attacks, Fanshawe Bay took a near-miss kamikaze and helped out Kitkan Bay at shooting kamikazes. At 9 o'clock, Kurita gave a cease-action order with instructions to rendezvous north. In the end, the US lost 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers and 1 destroyer escort. 23 aircraft were shot down and 1,161 men were killed. The Japanese lost 3 heavy cruisers, 52 aircraft, and casualties are from 250 up to 750 men, possibly more. The Japanese lost most of their surface forces and could not send out large-scale naval operations, their ships mostly transferring around mainland Japan and stayed in harbor.